Well, so what's going to be the next thing for Xi Jinping? What's going to be the goal if he's really got it in the bag like you say he does?
Well, I think it's going to be interesting, right? So I think the reason that you're still seeing the purges right now is because he wants to solidify this. So I've seen a lot of people saying that, Taiwan is next. Putin's going to take Ukraine and Xi's going to take Taiwan. And I don't know if I'm quite there yet. I just don't see the tea leaves trending in that direction. I still think that when it comes down to it, his greatest or most successful strategy with Taiwan is this generational strategy that they've been on. Were he to go after Taiwan through military action, that would be because he saw a threat to his legitimacy, a threat to his rule, a threat to the party's legitimacy. But because you don't have that threat, you don't have that external force that's forcing his hand, why not just simply go along with where he's already pitched himself? Now, at the same time, you are seeing the expansion really of China on the maritime stage outside of Asia Pacific in ways that we haven't seen before. Really, I think in terms of all of Chinese history, you're seeing their agreements in Africa on the Atlantic. You're seeing their agreements in the Caribbean. I come to this as a prior Navy intelligence officer, so of course I'm always going to be a little more biased towards seeing what's going on the seas. But because shipping is, of course, one of the major concerns for China, this has also been one of the biggest issues in the supply chain crisis, because as the lockdowns have hit in places like Ningbo, places like Tianjin, that's led to a lot of these supply chain issues that we're seeing in the U.S. and across the West. I think you're going to see an increase in Chinese shipping and port agreements in the Atlantic Ocean. I also think you're going to see a lot more Chinese naval activity in those areas to be able to secure their maritime commercial interests. And I think over land, you are going to see more and more. I mentioned Ukraine a second ago. You're seeing now continental Europe is starting to kind of move away from the US-UK axis in NATO. And I think they're moving a lot closer to China in terms of this. The EU is looking at China as a potential economic and commercial vector for them in a way that they haven't seen before. That's why the head of the German Navy was just fired last week, this vice admiral, because when he was down in India saying that we should unite with India and Russia and form this anti-China bloc. I mean, they immediately fired him for saying that.
Well, so for China to create this sort of maritime empire that you're suggesting, it needs to lock down the South China Sea, which they've been very successful at, but they still need Taiwan to get that final linchpin of the South China Sea. Now, you seem to be saying that they are still going to push this sort of generational one country, two systems model that they tried with Hong Kong, but it seems like the Taiwanese public is very against that. And with the frequent incursions of the Chinese, Air Force into Taiwan's EEZ, do you think they really expect the generational thing to work? Or, why would they be planning that when it seems like the Taiwanese population does not want it, and at the same time China is pushing this very heavy-handed military aggression?
The one interesting thing that I've noticed with Taiwan lately, and a lot of this is being pushed by the DPP there, is that they seem to be going kind of woke. Have you guys noticed that at all?
What is woke?
What is woke? So it's sort of this political correctness from the 90s, but on steroids, right? Just a lot of, pushing a lot of green policies, pushing a lot of this pie in the sky, as my grandma would probably call it, like hippy dippy, good time, funky hour type policies. It seems like the DPP is actually in some cases softening a lot of Taiwan's institutions. And I really question why that would be, because if they obviously were put in a wartime scenario with China, you're going to need some hardened institutions, and you're certainly going to need a hardened society to be able to do that. I'm just not seeing that same type of rhetoric from the DPP in terms of that. When I look really at the domestic policies in terms of what they're doing, huge green energy pushes, huge pushes for against climate change, and a lot of things that maybe down the road would be very successful for them, but in the near term, really you'd think that shoring up their energy base as well as their ability to, and I have seen, by the way, some excellent economic deals that are being made, particularly in the semiconductor front, between Taiwan and the United States in places like Ohio, places like Arizona, where they're looking at building prefab sites there. I mean, I really think this is Taiwan's comparative advantage. They've got to keep stressing that, pushing forward. As far as whether, so obviously, I get the question you're asking is, will they invade Taiwan? I don't see it quite yet. I don't think they need to do it quite yet. I think that they're going to continue to try their softer policy just because it's working for them, right? It's working very well for them. They've been extremely successful at this. Everybody's making money. The military is getting much larger. And at the same time, the same situation, by the way, that Putin and Ukraine are looking at right now, they know that if they go to direct conflict, right, that they're going to lose their ability to get those economic deals or the ability for, in Russia's case, to get those security guarantees from Ukraine, right, vis-a-vis their NATO membership. At the same token, if China goes and crosses the line and just invades Taiwan, that obviously is going to kill their international standing. And the Western elites aren't going to be able to just say, oh, well, that's fine, right? Because we haven't gone through the one country, two systems process. There's been no quote unquote handover of Taiwan. It wouldn't even make sense the same way there was for Hong Kong. So even when they conducted the jackbooted crackdowns on Hong Kong throughout 2019 and 2020, it kind of was already a fait accompli because the West had, by and large, given up Hong Kong back in the 90s and the negotiations back in the 80s. And so I think with Taiwan, especially, by the way, if you look at American opinion polling, what strikes me as quite interesting is that there's no appetite, really. There's like a 30% approval rating or support rating for going to war in Ukraine. There's just no support for it whatsoever. But when you ask the same question about Taiwan, in the defense of Taiwan, should the United States come, it's something like 60-70%.
So it sounds like Taiwan, an invasion of Taiwan, could be an actual kind of black swan event that could mess things up for Xi Jinping.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, obviously that, I guess that comes to, would it be a huge miscalculation on his part? And you haven't seen many miscalculations from Xi Jinping, right? He has done a very good job of playing the chessboard. He's done a very good job of understanding where foreign leaders are going to come down when they respond to different things. He understands our system better than we do. He's got excellent advisors in terms of understanding the West. And you're also seeing, by the way, that they are, certainly working to harden their culture, cracking down on various forms of internet, various forms of what they call disruptive behaviors on the internet. And so I could see a situation, though, where potentially, and just, again, hypothetically, to answer your question, that he becomes so overconfident that he thinks that an invasion is in the cards. But it would take a little bit while for him to get there.
I think what's interesting is that they seem to be, or Xi Jinping and the Communist Party seem to be trying to insulate their economy from the world economy in terms of, as you were saying, like, if they did invade Taiwan, there would be a bunch of pushback from the West. Like, we wouldn't be able to just say it's no big deal. But like with this whole dual circulation thing they're doing, right, where they're trying to be like, okay, we're going to be self-reliant on our domestically, but we still want the world to be reliant on us for manufacturing, but we need to be good at semiconductors. We need to be in a place where we don't have to rely on, Western financial institutions or Western, semiconductors, this kind of stuff. Like, does this seem like it's getting ready for a point when they wouldn't need to worry if the West, turned their back after a Taiwan invasion?
Well, they certainly want to get to that point, and they want to get to the point where they are self-sufficient from not only the SWIFT system, but essentially the way that they've very carefully and very cautiously been looking at ways to take down the U.S. dollar as the world reserve currency. Whenever they talk about currency, they sort of talk about, moving to a basket of currencies or allowing different currencies to be used on the One Belt, One Road system. Or looking at ways to potentially use One Belt, One Road to circumvent the petrodollar, and then be able, of course, they want to get, bottom line is they want to get their oil from Iran. They also want to do deals in Saudi Arabia. They're also doing deals in Iraq right now. Huge, by the way, push for Chinese companies in Iraq that's going on this week. And they want that overland through essentially, you probably can't get pipelines through Pakistan and Xinjiang, but maybe railroads and then pipelines to some extent, just because of how mountainous it is and how cold it is in certain points of the year. But, if we can get a pipeline across Alaska, who's to say they can't do it either? And so that's one of the main things that they're looking at in terms of, because they've got to fuel all this, right? Their energy costs are astounding, and they know that this is a huge problem for them. This is also why shipping is so important to them, because they have to import pretty much all of their oil right now by sea. They don't have the ability to do it overland. And so that's a huge, huge issue for U.S. policymakers, because as you're looking at this question of, should Russia be aligned with the United States against China? Well, the more you demonize Russia, the more you drive them into the arms of China, the same way that the EU is now looking at having good commercial and economic relations with China, and potentially seeing them as a replacement for the United States as, the dominant power in the world. And so if that is the case, then, like you say, they are going to be building a system more and more that has nothing to do with direct links or reliance on the United States system or anything that's based out of, New York or Washington.